Hey guys, welcome back. Mr. Woodman, back at it again. 7.2, Fighting the Great War. It's going to continue of Chapter 7, World War I and the Russian Revolution, right? So this is going to get into fighting of the war. We've already seen this before. We've read about this before. We've covered this in class. So I'm going to go over these couple slides pretty quickly. So let's get started. These are going to be your key terms: stalemate, Zeppelins, U-boat, convoys, Dardanelles, and T.E. Lawrence. Now, these are going to be your learning objectives. Like I said in the last video, these are going to be your California State Standards, your Common Core Standards. These are going to be taken directly from there. So you're going to learn how to understand how trench warfare led to a stalemate on the Western Front. Identify and describe the impact of modern military technology on the fighting. Outline the course of the war on multiple European fronts, and explain how World War I was a global conflict, right? Hence the name World War I. Okay, so let's get started. It's going to be a new kind of war. Of course, in that picture is going to be soldiers in the trenches. We've already seen videos of the trenches. This is going to be in Israel. The Israeli, was what they called the Middle Eastern Front at the time. Everything over there was just called Israel at one point. So the World War I, known at the time as the Great War, was the largest conflict in history up to that time. The French mobilized almost 8.5 million men, the British nearly 9, the Russians 12, and the Germans 11. Now, what does it mean by mobilized? Well, that just means they went to war, pretty much. They were taken from their homes and sent somewhere else for the war effort. Okay. For those who fought, the statistics were more personal. 1 out of every 4 men who went out to the World War did not come back again, recalled the survivor. And of those who came back, many were maimed and blind, and some were mad. Right? Class, not mad as in angry, but mad as in they're not mentally all there. We would call that today PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We have a greater understanding of mental health and how important that is. But at the time, they would just say, "Oh, he lost it. He went crazy." Kind of like the video of the picture of this guy here. This is one of the most famous pictures of World War I. I believe it's in your book. If not, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's in your book. The name of this picture is, I think it's just a shell-shocked soldier. My class, we've already talked about this before, but this is going to be the first war that really changes the way people view just the horrors of conflict, right? As you can tell by this picture. Dude looks nuts. So this is going to be a picture of Europe in World War I in 1914. So who do you think was in a better strategic position at the start of the war, the Allies or the Central Powers? Right, class? Who do you think it has an advantage from the get-go? Pause it, think about it, right? If you're just looking at this at a strictly strategic, not knowing anything about what's going to happen, you would say probably the Allies, right, class? Because really the Allies have the Central Powers kind of boxed in, right, class? So there's going to be 2 different war fronts. What you can see in the front line right here in the blue, this right here is going to be where the trenches are in the east, and these are going to be the ones on the west. As you can tell, right, Germany and Austria-Hungary are kind of boxed in. They have nowhere to go, right, except for the Ottomans. So initially, you would probably want to say the Allies have the upper hand, but we don't know. So class, another video, a picture of just the absolute horrors of the war, shrapnel. This German soldier was one of the many casualties of the fighting during World War I. Massive offenses and new military technology combined to produce extremely high casualty rates. Like I said, 1 in 4 people died. Now, this is going to be a photo of something that is, right, class, impossible 50 years before, 30 years before. 20 years before, this was impossible. The enormous casualties suffered on the Western Front were due in part to the destructive power of modern weapons. 2 significant weapons were the rapid-fire machine gun and the long-range artillery gun. Machine guns mowed down waves of soldiers. Artillery allowed troops to shell the enemy from more than 10 miles away. The shrapnel or flying debris from artillery shells killed or wounded even more soldiers than the guns. Right, class? So imagine just chucking grenades at people. Right, you getting hit by the shrapnel isn't not by the shrapnel, by the shell. Think of it as a cannonball, right? So when you shoot a cannonball at something, the person that's the destructive force of a cannonball is the cannon itself. So when it shoots and it hits me in the chest, I blow up, right? Because it's a cannonball. It's just going to go through me. The difference between these is if I shoot the cannonball, now the cannonball explodes, right? Now the cannonball itself isn't killing me, but it's all the pieces that shoot off after it explodes. That's is what's so deadly. This is going to be a picture of 2 men wearing gas masks shooting machine guns, right? Poison gas and machine guns are 2 examples of the military technology that killed and wounded so many. These British machine gunners wore gas masks during the Battle of the Somme in France of July 1916. Right, class? These 2 slides are going to be able to answer one of the topic 7 assessments, and that's going to be number 8. So look at these slides, and that's going to be able to answer number 8 for you in the topic 7 assessments. Right, class? This is going to be a very famous photo of German U-boats. This is going to be one of the first German U-boats captured. Not necessarily captured, but captured, I mean, in photographic form, like taking a picture of, off the coast of the Netherlands. Other European fronts, right? From the outset of World War I, Germany and Austria-Hungary battled Russia on the Eastern Front. Their battle lines shifted back and forth, sometimes over large areas, huge areas. Even though the armies were not mired in trench warfare, mired just means they weren't stuck there in trench warfare, casualties rose even higher than on the Western Front. The results were just as indecisive. So, class, it's not as for example, what we showed you for the little quick clip of 1917 of the movie, or in the documentary I showed you, where the trenches just weren't not moving. If you decided to try to go over the fence, you would just get mowed down. In the Eastern Front, next to Russia, there was just this massive groups of people who were constantly just going at each other and canceling each other out. So they weren't stuck there like trench warfare, but they were stuck there in terms of just the massive amounts of people just canceling each other out. Of course, just quick little notes. There's also going to be a war in Southern Europe where the Austria-Hungary is going to be, and the Slavic forces, the Balkans, and the mounting Russian losses in the East. This is going to be very important because Russia's going to have a habit, especially in the world wars, of just throwing bodies at the problem. They're not really thinking about, hey, there's a machine gun, we should probably go around it. Instead, they're going to say, hey, well, if we throw enough bodies at it, eventually they're going to run out of bullets and eventually we could break through. And that's going to lead to massive amounts of losses, massive amounts of deaths. This is going to be an Austrian soldier advanced to Russian Poland during the winter of 1915, class. War wasn't supposed to last this long. Like we saw in the documentary, the English thought the war was going to end by Christmas. And turns out that's not going to be the case. It's going to evolve into a global conflict. Though most of the fighting took place in Europe, World War I was a global conflict. In 1914, Japan joined the Allies by declaring war on Germany. Japan used the war as an excuse to seize German outposts in China and islands in the Pacific. Japan's advances in East Asia and the Pacific would have far-reaching consequences in the years ahead, as ambitious Japanese leaders set out to expand their footholds in China. So going forward, class, we understand that we're, as in the United States, we're going to have issues with Japan and the Pacific after all of this. So during the rise of this imperialistic Japan, actually called Imperial Japan, this is where it starts. They're going to see this as an opportunity to get rid of the Germans outside their backyard and to actually crown themselves as the leaders of Asia. They're going to start going into China, Manchuria, and so on and so forth. They're going to start taking colonies along the other islands in the Pacific. And this is where their global power is going to stem from. More to say, the Ottoman Empire joins the war. We talked about this before. The Ottomans are going to be very close, very buddy-buddy with Germany. Deportation and mass murder of the Armenians. Sadly, we just don't have enough time to talk about this, but this is going to be very, very important. The European colonies and the war, right? Now, I can't really go over it with you guys because it's easier to talk about it in person and dedicate a whole period to it. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys this question. What is the Armenian genocide? Pause it, look it up, Google it. This is going to be something that's going to be very, very controversial, very contentious. And to a lot of countries something that didn't exist, didn't happen. And I want you to think about why would they say that? Or why won't they acknowledge the genocide that clearly happened, right? So go ahead and look that up. Now, class, this is going to be the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is going to be in orange. So if you look, Constantinople, Gallipoli, Baghdad, and Iraq. So the Allied forces under T.E. Lawrence are going to go ahead and just pretty much work their way up. They're going to constantly, from Hellas, they're going to constantly work their way up and try to go through the Ottoman Empire. Because ultimately, once you get to the rivers, the Euphrates, now you have access, and the Mediterranean. Now you have access to more allies. You have access to more supply runs. So, for example, class, if you're stuck in the middle, right? Let's say you're stuck here. Is it easy for you to get supplies if you run low? No. However, if you go through the coast, right, or if you eventually get to here, the river, it's a lot easier for you to get those supplies. Now, of course, these red dots are going to be the battle sites. So, of course, class, they're going to be close to the rivers. They're going to be close to the coast, as you can see here, right? Now, how did the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire affect the Allied cause? So, quickly, class, how do you think them slowly but surely taking territory away from the Ottomans, how do you think that's going to help the war effort for the Allies and hurt the war effort for the Central Powers? Okay, now a global conflict. These Armenian refugee children were forced from their homes by the Ottoman government's deportation campaigns. They are waiting to receive their daily ration of food provided by American relief workers. So class, again, this was made for us to talk about in person, right? This is supposed to be shown to you after we've actually had a discussion about the Armenian genocide. But here we are. And these are going to be your quiz questions. So once again, class, open up that document that has the questions for chapter 7. This would be under 7.2. Number 1, what was one effect of the failure of Germany's Schlieffen Plan to quickly defeat France? We've talked about the Schlieffen Plan forever. You should be able to answer that easily. Now, what was the most significant effect of U-boat attacks on the fighting on mainland? Easy as that. What was one way the Eastern Front was different from the Western Front? Right, class? I've talked about that right now. Why did the Ottoman Empire suffer important losses in the Middle East? Okay, super simple to talk about there. And that's pretty much going to be it. Hope you guys prefer this more than reading it on your own. All right, I'll be back at it with 7.3. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.